Yeah, Lagos State, interestingly, has heightened in recent time and is continuing unabated. We'd also look at this issue is the Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, Mr. Mumuni. It's a pleasure having you on SaharaTV once again, sir.
It's a pleasure being here. I'm so grateful.
One big question has always been the blame game. Who's to blame? Some have cast aspersion on the government who had marked such buildings for demolitions. Others have castigated the owners of those places, buildings themselves. From your perspective, who is to blame?
Let me say straight away that in every society, there will always be non-conformists. So when laws are made to regulate specific set of affairs in the society, it is for the people charged with the responsibility of enforcing the law to see that once the laws are violated, people are brought to justice, they are brought in line. And that is why I would say, to me, I would blame the government. People are entitled to say we want to reap immediately. People are entitled to say we don't want to spend so much on building houses. People are entitled to say we want to cut corners. But it's for the government to say, these are the rules. Follow it if you want to construct. Once the rules are not followed, then whatever should be the consequence should automatically be the consequence. Nobody should be treated as sacred cows.
The governor of Lagos State
Yes.
actually made the statement that they had tried demolition in those residents. In fact, they've conducted integrity tests, and some of the buildings have been marked for demolition.
Yes.
But they had resistance from the landlord, so to say, non-conformist. I mean, what does that tell you about the inactions of the government? Itself?
You see, I am one of those that believe that if the government says, I want to do this, or if the government says citizens should not do this particular thing, and the citizen continues to do that particular thing, and the citizens are allowed to continue to do it, I want to say the government is not really serious about saying people should not do it. Because all the instrumentalities of power and coercion resides in the government. A government properly elected has legitimacy, has authority to do whatever he sees or he considers to be in the best interest of the people. And to now say buildings have been marked for demolition and landlord resisted the government, that to me is a no-brainer. It's not possible.
Let's look at the role of government itself in providing adequate housing for people. I mean, having conducted those integrity tests, and you know that those buildings are supposed to be demolished, and they were not demolished, shouldn't government have provided at least temporary shelters for those individuals?
And that is what they have just decided to do when this building collapsed at Itafaji on Lagos Island recently. Because it is, let's take it straight away, it is the responsibility of government to provide for the well-being, happiness, and welfare of its citizens. To me, a government that is not able to cater for the well-being and happiness of citizens, to me, is a band of armed robbers. That's the way I look at an irresponsible government. And I know that Lagos State cannot be an irresponsible government, and whoever that we have elected to govern our affairs in Lagos State cannot afford to be irresponsible, because the world will be watching. If anything happens in Lagos, it is taken all over Nigeria in terms of knowledge and information of that event. So, and that is why I believe that Lagos State government cannot be responsible. Lagos State, when disaster like this happens, must come in straight away. Apart from now demolishing the structure that had collapsed, the Lagos State government should take steps to ameliorate the sufferings of the people. Let me say straight away that it is not anybody's fault. It is not the citizen's fault that they are poor. Because, let me say, it is not easy for anybody to live in a dilapidated house. They are forced into such situation by lack of economic empowerment to look for better buildings. We know when we see buildings that are okay, we know it. And we also live in buildings that are technically defective to our eyes because we lack the financial means to get a better and comfortable alternative. So when matters are like that, a responsible government must come in and see how it should. We've been talking about housing for some time in Nigeria. When I was in secondary school in the 1970s, 77, I hear education for all by year 2000, housing for all by year 2000, health for all by year 2000. As if 2000 will never come. Now we are almost 20 years past 2000. We still cope and hope to cope with such existential matters. Matters of housing, matters of education, matters of good roads. Shouldn't we have passed all those stages? So that is the way I look at it. The government should provide basic, affordable housing for its citizens. That is the responsibility of government.
Let's get your legal perspective on this. What does the law say? Because now, some experts have said over 1,000 buildings are already technically defective and they are supposed to be demolished. And having conducted some integrity tests themselves by the government themselves, they've discovered that there are some houses that will have to go, to be demolished, which will eventually force people, people will be evicted.
Yes.
What does the law say about forced eviction in these circumstances? What's the
No, you see, what I think must happen, in spite of that a building is defective and has to be demolished, is that when you have seen such building, you should still follow the due process of law in getting the people to vacate and eventually take over. It is not as if a building is distressed, gives the government the license to just move in anyhow and start beating people around and say we want to enforce our law. Let me say first of all that there are laws relating to planning regulations in Lagos State. There are people assigned to perform these functions. What were their duties? Have they performed it as is expected of them? That has not happened. So I want to say that the government is complicit, its officials is complicit in all these problems that we now have. So people at the urban planning sector of Lagos life must be looked into directly at the face and tell them it is because you marked this building for demolition, you now went to sleep, and a building had been marked for the past 4 years. Does it take 4 years for demolition to take place? So when things are not happening the way it should happen, some people that have been assigned responsibility to do that and they are not doing it must be called to question, they must be sanctioned.
This is not the first time that
Yes.
buildings will be collapsing.
Yes.
Inquiries have actually been set up. And we had, these are in the public domain. What happened to those public inquiries? No head seems to be rolled at this point.
Yes.
One would have expected under Senate climate that heads will have rolled I mean, but nothing seems to be happening.
You
Nobody is being held accountable.
Thank you. You see, the problem that I see with the Nigerian general environment is that we have attempted and imbibed the culture of not making our laws function. We don't enforce our laws. And that is the tragedy of the Nigerian society that I see. When laws are made, they must be enforced. When things don't now happen according to as prescribed by law, people that are supposed to do the enforcement must be called to question. They must be made to pay for it. That to me is the only way out. For example, we've been talking about electoral violence all this while. People committed electoral violence in 1983. People committed it in 1987. People committed it in subsequent elections, and none had ever been taken up or prosecuted for it. And that is why we see what I call impunity of perpetrators constantly rearing its ugly head. And you see, Nigerians understand what the government does. Nigerian data people disturbed the Nigerian economic life. They disturbed, they kidnapped, and we came over with amnesty for Nigerian Delta people. Boko Haram people came, they perpetrated all manners of atrocities. Some people are now suggesting also that amnesty for Boko Haram people. So when will we stop this? Must we allow our laws to be paper laws rather than law in action for us to now know what should be done? To me, that is not the fairest way to go.
Let me ask you, sir. I mean, considering the aberrant culture of negligence and impunity that has come to play more glaringly in recent times due to this building collapse, what is the corrigendum at this point in time that should be done by government itself in order to assuage public feelings?
Good. Let the government draw a line. Assuming the government had shown lack of interest earlier, let us now say, from the time the building collapsed last week on Lagos Island, let's forget all that has happened. Henceforth, nobody shall build, contrary to building regulations, nobody shall build 3-story building on the premises, in respect of which approval for 2-story building has been. So, henceforth, things must be done properly. It is when things are done properly that we can now say we are now getting to civilized standard of behavior. We cannot expect a different result when we do the same thing repeatedly and miss all the time.
Your organization called for compensation plans for victims and families, those who were affected in the recent building collapse. I mean, what kind of compensation are we looking at for this?
For instance, we know that in saner and more serious environments, when disasters happen, a building collapse, a disaster. Once disaster happens, the government of the day would, first of all, there will be victims of such collapse. So the government of the day will now look at the victims in the eye directly and say, and meet their immediate needs. It is not enough to pull down buildings. That is providing buildings for people that want to survive, that are merely that are living from hand to mouth, is the responsibility of government. It is not for Nigeria is a country that I think Nigerians should not have any business with poverty, and it is consistent actions and actions of government that have led to the poverty-stricken situation of Nigerians. Now, matters of providing, for instance, a new affordable accommodation for the victims is so important. Matters of how they will survive in the interim is also part of the business of government. I think those are the compensations that our organization sees, which are the responsibility of a responsive and serious government.
Do you see this government, this present Lagos State government actually doing that, considering their failure to actually properly adequately took care of victims of forced evictions in Badia and Otodobame, just to mention some places where they actually evicted citizens. I mean, there seems to be a culture of impunity in that regard by this government. Do you see that happening?
You see, the reason why it has not happened and it is not likely to happen is when citizens say, okay, it is in their culture to ride roughshod over us, and we leave them to God. In Sena environment, they don't even talk about God. We talk about God too much in Nigeria. And it is this idea that everything belongs to God that we clothe our government with, and they become consistently irresponsible. When we insist, and when we insist without ceasing, things will change.
Mr. Mumuni, thank you very much for your insightful analysis.
It is a pleasure being here.
We'll be right back.